Okay, I sent it to you from Radio Lake Studios. Refresh your email. I know it'll show up. Just give it a minute.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2021 Here Now Festival. I'm Russell McGee, the festival director, and I'd just like to take a moment and thank some of our sponsors. Earplay is actually one of the sponsors, so shout out to them since we're on a panel about Earplay. And then the Writers Guild of Bloomington, Indiana, actually Sennheiser, SAG-AFTRA, the Whisper Room. Just to name a few. We have quite a few others, and I'd just like to thank all of them for being a sponsor and making this festival possible. I'd also just invite you to check out the rest of the panels and other live performances that we'll be doing tonight. Especially, we have actually 5 different programs, part of Audio Tonight, that you'll be able to see live in the evening. And with that, I would like to introduce John Myers and let him take it from there. You're muted, John.
Of course. Hey, everybody. I just want to say hi. And John Myers, the co-founder and CEO of Earplay. Wanted to just say thanks a lot for this opportunity to kind of talk about the shared passion that we have for audio drama. So thanks. And I also look forward to seeing people in person next year. Dave?
You're muted, Dave.
I'm stuck. Oh, I'm not stuck. I was stuck. I was stuck on mute. I don't know why exactly. Hi, Dave Grossman. Totally incompetent with technology, and no, not really. I come from the world of computer games to you now. I've been writing and designing and directing story games, I'll call them, for upwards of 30 years. You may have heard a few of them. The Secret of Monkey Island and Day of the Tentacle are things I co-created in the 1990s at LucasArts. More recently, I directed design and writing at a company called Telltale, where we were trying to do games episodically, like TV shows. And then in between, I wrote a lot of games for kids. Some of you may have grown up with Pajama Sam. And then more recently, since 2014, I've been working in interactive audio at Earplay with John. And now I will pass it on to Brandon, who will come off mute.
Yes. My name is Brandon Wentz. I'm a voice actor and I'm the producer at Crit Show Studios, where we make actual play podcasts for role-playing games. But with Earplay, I was in a number of their projects as a voice actor and also the casting director and the vocal director for a number of the projects as well.
I'm already unmuted. Oh my goodness. Hi, Bonnie Bogovich here. Happy to be on this panel with these guys. I've been a member of Earplay via two routes. One is a voice actor. I did voice work on Pugmire, which I'm wearing the shirt proudly for. I play a cat in the dog world called One-Eyed Mad Molly. In addition, I worked as a sound editor, sound designer, and just post audio support for a couple projects, including most recently, I think Jurassic World Revealed, an office hours project as well that was made for the Future of Storytelling conference. And I think one or two others, but I can't remember. Oh, and I've been on panels with John before. We actually spoke at PAX Unplugged a couple years ago, ironically on a panel called The Future of Voices Now or something. And now years later, and we're actually in the future and people are really digging it. So it didn't go anywhere. We didn't lie.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Yeah. So, what we thought we'd do, since, it's probably, not just simple to understand, well, what is interactive audio drama? Where did it come from? I figured we'd give some background on that, and what it means to be, participate in an audio drama and what we mean by that, what a little bit about that sort of thing. Maybe even show you a quick demo. And then we can just open it up to questions. But, this sort of started, I have a background in playwriting and acting. I did a lot of theater in my 20s. Really enjoyed that. Got an MFA, and then I didn't really have a way to make money. And so what I decided to do was get into games, which actually was becoming a really big thing with Facebook games and mobile games, in around 2010-ish and so. And that was fun. I got to, work on some properties and figure out how to tell stories in an interactive way. When I had the opportunity to kind of form my own company and do something unique, it all kind of fell back to well, I used to love working with actors, developing a script, and then how can I do that in an interactive way? What had happened is that there weren't a lot of assistants at that time. There was really just kind of a couple apps, and there was Siri, and there was a push-to-talk situation. But when it came to what could I do, I found some tech folks that understood how to use voice recognition and speech recognition, and we thought, well, what if we could develop a system that plays an audio file, like you're listening to a radio drama or a musical or something along those lines of acting, sound effects, that sort of thing. But then you could listen and also give input at certain moments, like the mic would open. You could say something, and then you could be inside that radio drama. And that, again, was 2013, kind of before Alexa. We didn't know that, Serial hadn't come out yet. Podcasts hadn't boomed. It was really early days, but we just started to have this passionate idea of what about doing that? So we made a Kickstarter, and that Kickstarter was successful. We made what we kind of always termed the first interactive audio drama, codenamed Cygnus, and that launched in August of 2013, and it sort of mixed the new technology of these voice of speech recognition alongside this idea of interactive drama, alongside theater and audio drama. And shortly after that is when kind of my colleague in the industry, Dave, got involved. He had been doing really cool stuff alongside this, like at Telltale, which is kind of like interactive dramas, interactive, almost like animated movies. And we both thought that was fascinating. So I was really happy to see him join up, and we made this demo, which I think would be probably the next best thing. Is kind of given the background where it comes from and the passion and all the study of audio drama that went into it. But here's a quick sort of experience on the Alexa Earplay app that Bonnie's just going to do that fast sort of demo, so you can understand what it's all about.
Alexa, open Earplay demo.
Okay, here's Earplay. Welcome back to Earplay. To continue from your story bookmark, say resume. You can also say options.
Resume?
Here's your next prompt. When you're ready to start, say ready.
Ready.
It's a great restaurant, but your guest is late. He's always late. You've texted twice and now you're toying with the silverware, wondering if you should just order, when suddenly a young woman you've never seen in your life sits down at your table. She looks anxious.
Pretend you know me.
Do you ask questions or play along?
Ask questions.
You ask her, what's going on?
I think I'm being followed. I've done something I probably shouldn't have. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. Then I'm out of your life forever.
A server comes over and puts 2 drinks on your table. It's not the same waiter who's been refilling your water glass. and you never ordered any drinks. You can send them back, take a drink, or leave them alone.
Send them back.
The waiter mumbles an apology and removes the drinks, placing the tray precariously on the edge of a nearby table. He leaves your napkin behind. An accident, you think, until you notice the handwritten note on it. It reads, "Don't trust her." The woman is eyeing the waiter suspiciously. Her handbag sits nearby, partially open. You can see a gun inside, as well as a slim wallet holding an official-looking ID card. The woman is distracted, and the handbag is within reach just barely. Do you take the gun, take the wallet, or wait?
Take the wallet.
You reach over and snatch the wallet, hiding it in your lap. The ID is for a Jeanette Conley, senior researcher at BKI Pharmaceuticals. But the picture looks older than the woman next to you, and the hair color is different. The longer you look, the more certain you are that it's a picture of someone else. Over at the sideboard, your waiter is on the phone, talking intensely. There is a peculiar bulge under his left arm, where a shoulder holster might be. You wonder if you should warn your companion, who has shifted to look past you towards the front door, as if expecting someone. Suddenly, she stiffens.
Quick, kiss me.
Do you warn her, kiss her, or turn around?
Kiss her.
You lean in and kiss her. It's awkward at first. You can feel her trying to look around you towards the front door. But then she relaxes. For a moment, the restaurant seems to go completely silent. She reaches into her handbag, then presses something into your palm.
Guard this with your life.
It's a small vial of greenish liquid, slightly warm to the touch.
Ooh.
She begins to move away, and you figure you've only got time for one question. Do you ask, "What is this? Who are you?" Or why me?
Why me?
Honestly, no reason at all. You seem good, though. That's rare. I'm very sorry.
Hey, you!
You turn to see a large policeman at the entrance. The woman jumps up from the table.
Stay right where you are.
She sprints toward the kitchen, the policeman hot on her heels. She collides with the tray of drinks on the edge of the nearby table, stumbles, and falls to the ground. The policeman stands over her.
Don't move.
She pulls the gun from her handbag
Alexa.
and shoots him in the stomach.
Stop.
Thank you for using Earplay.
You're welcome.
Check out the Alexa app for our website address, where you'll find the latest Earplay
Oh, nice.
news. Goodbye for now.
Nice little
Alexa
commercial there.
Earplayer.
Yay.
So you,
Try to stop before it got really intense.
you can kind of see what we're up to there. It's sort of a role playing experience. We're giving the listener control over the central character in some kind of a story that's going on. It's not always something that uses a narrator like that. So, sometimes there will be like a full cast recording. It's more like an audio play, and there will be characters in the story who are prompting the listener to make decisions. And you can see it's sort of turn-based. And there are reasons of technology and privacy why it is turn-based. I can talk more about that later if people want to ask questions about it. And the player gets a turn like about every 30 seconds or so, and makes decisions for what the character is going to do and say, and then the story sort of responds to that. And it's a big sort of a weird, malleable thing that's happening. You sometimes. The stories are ones like this, where there's a sequence of events that's really kind of pushing things along, and the audience is mostly reacting to emergent situations. We also have a Mr. Robot story that works that way, and a Jurassic World story. You might be running from the dinosaur, or hiding from the dinosaur, or trying to feed the dinosaur, but your moment is really all about that dinosaur. It's quite narrow. You can't just sort of wander off and do something else. You're faced with a dinosaur. You gotta deal with that. That kind of structure lends itself to kind of action adventure kinds of stories. We like doing those. But other times things can be more exploratory and open-ended, and the audience has a lot more control over the sequence of events. We did a Jack Ryan story that plays like an escape room. So you can sort of wander around and poke at this and that, and the story is mostly reacting to you instead of the other way around. As you can imagine, that means lots of branches and changing content and different versions of things, and it all gets pretty complicated, but the details of sort of what we are giving the player control over and what's going to happen in response to that are exactly what makes my job really, really interesting. And I just feel sorry for sort of the other people on the panel who have to do things like act in these things and
Oh
handle
gosh darn,
masses of
we're so
recording
sorry to be
production.
involved, Dave. We're so
Yeah.
sorry.
You will
No,
admit that it gets a little hairy and complicated at times.
I won't not admit it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing that really is still the same no matter what is just that there's, and I think everybody in this audience is going to agree with this. There's an extreme power in just the visual pictures that go on in a person's head when they're listening, when you're listening to an audio drama, and that's just so different. I remember when we were trying to get press, and we got like a write up in the New York Times and stuff like that for being cool and innovative, but they always went back to this idea that they were like, I think one of the funniest quotes is like your imagination or 4K will never beat your imagination. In terms of fidelity or something like that. And that's what we love about it, is because it enables us to do it in, to think about grand, big things. Like we had a whole thing about, like Dave was referencing Jurassic World, which is a trip around Ile Nublar, set around the events of the second Jurassic World movie. And we were able to kind of do all kinds of wild and crazy things that we were only bound by our imagination and the technical aspects of making one of these things. And so that was a lot of fun. And I find that those who really appreciate audio dramas really dig this stuff as well.
It's very freeing not to, speaking as a person who has spent many years making computer games where most of the effort was in drawing things and making 3D models, it's very freeing not to have to do that.
Yeah. And I think, if anybody has any questions, please jump in. We'll kind of riff and talk a little bit. I want to pass it to, Brandon and Bonnie here in a second. But I think one of the major differences for me, if you were to say, hey, how would I do this? And we have technology and are available to, make things, and we'd love to make friends with people that make audio dramas. So, by all means, reach out. But the major difference, Dave kind of hinted at it, this idea of like, who is the narrator and or what I would say prompt giver. Like, traditionally there's like this Aristotelian sort of structural way that you plot out a drama and you write characters and there's different spins on that, but it's all still kind of the same. It's like, there's always some sort of a protagonist and or action oriented character that has conflict and runs into difficulties and situations and has to overcome them to get to a climax, blah, 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 right? Well, that still stays the same, but the very big difference here is that somewhere along the way, early on, you have to determine how are we providing choices to this listener, this user, and like Dave was saying, there's a few different ways to do it. It's like in game, it's like for Cygnus, we have it's a spy thriller, and so we have the person is in your ear, like your handler, and they can see everything. And so they're with you during all these like present tense moments during dialogue. And then something happens and it's like, oh, what are you going to do, agent? This or that, right? And so that becomes one way. In Jurassic World, it's kind of similar. You're playing not so much the protagonist, but you are still the action-oriented decider. Like the podcaster is trying to figure out what to do, and they always turn to you as the producer of this thing that you're running around the island. Like, well, what do we do? What do we do? And then there's more like what you saw in the demo, which is a little bit more internal monologue. There's an omniscient sort of a narrator, and you're kind of floating through the opportunity image by image. But that's always got to be a decision you have to make early on, is how does that make work? How does that make sense narratively for what you're presenting? And that's just highly different than doing something that would be like linear.
Yeah, and I think just going off of what John said there about the idea of branching narratives and stuff, I've done a lot of vocal direction, and this is such a different process because, first off with the auditions, the lines that you're going to pick, you want to make sure that you pick from the wide branch of what it is the character is going to experience, because you don't want to, as with like a normal kind of linear narrative, that growth is not going to be the same, and it's not going to end in the same place depending on the path that the participants choose. And so, You know, you want to make sure that you have lines that represent that whole kind of weighted area. And then in the actual recording of it, part of the job in this for the vocal director was keeping track of, you know, okay, so we get to this point, they've got a branch here, they've got a branch here, they've got a branch here, and now we're in the middle of the story, and there are 12 different places they could be. Okay, so where is that character mentally and emotionally? And you want to help the actors keep track of that, because they're going to be doing that same line a couple different ways, and then they're going to move on. They're going to do the next line, you know, a dozen different ways. And you want to help them keep track of that arc, as well as the overall arc of the character. And a lot of that came down to referencing old takes. Like, okay, so this one is connected to when you chose to get the gun, when you chose to leave the woman on the balcony, and when you chose to buy cigarettes instead of alcohol. And so that will give them a frame of reference for, okay, so this is where the character has traveled to. And it's really fun to keep track of, because you're kind of getting alternate versions of that same character, and the actor gets to experience that. But as the voice director for this, you want to help keep tabs on that, because they're going to get so overwhelmed, but hit with so many different variations of a similar line.
I will say, as a voice actor who's been on the end of the person who has to record a lot of that, whenever you're doing in session, the most you can do to have the director work with you in a proper timeline of what's actually happening in the game, even if it's possible tiers, so that you are acting out everything in the right order. You can hear the outcome of that in the takes. Like, if someone's lost and they're a voice actor and they don't really know what they're replying to, you can always hear it. But if you're being guided through the actual branching of this happens and here's these possible paths and here's how you react in those possible paths, it's fresh, you're in the moment, and it's just so much better for the player. And I find, if I can grab the reins for a little bit in the voice acting territory, for folks who are more used to working in audio dramas, in audiobooks, and linear pathing type things, this is very much what you'll experience if you're starting to work in games, as opposed to those routes where you need to practice having the same vocal inflections and same fresh energy, and being prepared sometimes to have 20 possible different responses that are going to repeat, depending on which way the player goes. It's very rare that maybe there's only one or two sentences that might happen and then your part is over. Because what happened in the example that we did, you can pick up someone's purse, you can reach for the gun, you can kiss them, you cannot kiss them. What are the 7 types of reactions that lady who you maybe kissed, didn't kiss, stole money from, took the gun from, took the wallet from is going to have? So prepare to be flexible and, have fun with it. But your job is to keep it cool and immersive and sound like you know what you're talking about, which is wacky.
Yeah, and I found it's very beneficial. My background is theater. I have my master's in acting. And a big thing that was very helpful when working on projects with Earplay was having different vocabulary for different performance styles, because not all actors are trained the same way. So different things are going to hit them. And you might say something to someone, and I'm sure probably everyone in this panel has been involved in a situation where you give a note to a voice actor and you feel them tense up. And then things start to progressively get a little worse. And that's not any commentary on their skill. A lot of times, and John can chime in on this too, as a director, a lot of times it's your language choice. How can I rephrase this?
Yeah.
How can I picture this to them so that it gets the result that I'm looking for?
Absolutely. It's always sort of about coaxing forward as opposed to getting behind and pushing.
Yeah.
You can always run into that. And I think what you're talking about earlier is building that trust where you're fully describing this as a director, every little moment, every little take, rather than just going line to line to line, to really like giving that context, gives that trust, gives that relaxation of like, okay, I got this. I know where I am,
I will say, as a voice actor, from that perspective, I've been on Brandon's side before, but whenever you're listening for direction and it's a live session and they're in your ear, the most scary thing can be hearing nothing back. So if you give a take and there's no response, even if it's, hey guys, that was great, we're just gonna review and give you some notes in a second. That's all the actor might need to know, that they didn't scare you away, or maybe the internet in the world exploded. Just let them know you're still there and that everything's still moving. Because when all you got is sound and then you got nothing,
Yeah.
Ooh.
Something else that's interesting in terms of acting is it is very different, the performance rules, so to speak, between, what are these moments in between prompts and input, and then that prompt giver, that sort of voice, the voice in the head or the narrator that is giving the options. I think what you saw in the demo was Cyrus Namadi. He does a really good job of that, sort of,
Cyrus.
because at that moment you've got to have the personality of the character or the narrator or whatever. It's got to sound good, but at the same time, in a way, you're part of the UI. Because you're presenting. It's almost like you're presenting buttons to a person's imagination about things they can possibly say and where are they going to click. And so and every time we kind of do this, we have to kind of find a subtle way. Like if it's an AI. Like like in Orpheus device, we have an AI that allows you to tunnel through and speak to the dead, which is really cool. But with that it's like
and Office Hours also had a very similar thing, where you have a human voice of a recording, you have a live person, you have what does an answering machine sound like, and they all have very different tones in what perspective you, the listener, are supposed to hear them. And that's a sound mixing thing too. It's actually two elements. Whenever you speaking from the audio mixing and design side of things, when you have sound effects and voice and no visuals helping you, everything that you plan out is either background, and possibly instructional, informative, supportive. You kind of have to know where all your layers go, because in the end, we were using the dot, for example. It's blue screen. You can see there's not a lot going on here, and it still has a more robust speaker system, these little holes, than some cheap phones people might be listening on. So whatever your mix is, it's got a 1B balance, so it can play on most of the devices that anyone might have. They might not all have the most $7 billion mixing studio in their house that they're listening to. And if someone is in the background and not the primary focus, like maybe a guy's going, "Hey, you, stop that, I'm chasing you," he should not be as upfront as that voice in your ear example John was talking about, or a character that maybe you are currently interacting with directly. Mixing is super important. And also the closeness. If someone's a character just having a conversation with you that's supposed to be maybe over here and you're in a bar setting, you have to hear the bar stuff in the background. You got to hear them clear enough, kind of like an NPC or basic player. And then anyone who's distance, you've got to use that old theatrical mindset of muffling stuff and maybe dulling it into more Walla land. But you're limited, and you might even have stereo is most likely not even a thing sometimes. So it's all got to be mono. It's got to sound good, cheap, mono, and it clear. John said there's no UI. Your sound effects and your cues, you program people from the time they start listening. If there's a flashback that a certain jingle goes off on, and you start establishing that that's the pattern, they know to listen for it. If there's a sound cue that means a hint has popped up, establish that early on. It's like a whole different way of game programming, instructional design, all these things just limited to your ears.
Yeah, it's a weird kind of UI design. Like it's not 100% true that there's no UI. Yeah. It's just that the UI is sharing space with the story that's being presented, and it struggles to find ways to sort of distinguish itself. And because we're using voice recognition, and because voice recognition is always a little dodgy, we want to give you the exact phrases that are going to make it work the best.
Oh yeah.
And I think what John was getting at is that we have a whole strategy around how we author those prompts that we give to the player, where we work those specific phrases into whatever the person is saying to you. And in the script, we write them in capital letters so that the actor will know to accentuate them and put a little space around them, so that it's like, hey, I'm a phrase that you're about to repeat, maybe if you want the story to do something.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who aren't used to playing on audio games, part of the sound mixer's job, and people who are putting together the final files that spew out of your device, whether it be the echo or whatnot, sometimes you get stuck with like the 90-second limit, where a prompt will happen, something will play from the cloud, it's being beamed down from the cloud, and it can go up to 90 seconds, and then that stops, and that is when it listens for you to say something. And it's almost becomes part of the game design that you have to build those instructions in for people not familiar with how how cloud pulled interactivity works.
Yeah. And when it does, the mic opens up and does listen, there's only 7, it's like limited. It's 7 seconds it listens. And if not, then it'll either repeat or you can tell it what to do if someone hasn't spoken up. But it means that a person can't be sitting there thinking deeply. Like I think there are some Telltale games, you're able to kind of control how much time they have to put an input in, right? So you can make these heady decisions. It's not quite the same because if someone is just sitting there thinking like, oh, do I want to do this? If it's too difficult, then they'll hit that time limit and they'll just repeat the question. And so you have to make it, you want to think about cognitive load a little bit about how these decisions are making somebody, choose something, but it's not too cerebral, so to speak. And also you can't have, here's the other funny thing is you can't have rhetorical questions or make moments seem like questions in between the prompts, because one of the earliest things we tested, we were like, it's natural to put rhetorical questions into dialogue and they're just there all the time. You don't realize how much you do it. But then we would be playing these games and people would be in the middle of like, there's no prompt here. But they hear the question. They're like, I got the answer to that. And it's like, oh shoot, they're expecting something to happen right now, but it's in the middle of just some audio drama.
It kind of goes down to, like I said, you have to design those sound cues to be sometimes where people let off, or that there's a part of the script that the actor is going to say, which is, and now you make the choice. If you want to really make it very clear, but if you want to make it smooth, all of the design, even if it's the ambience and stuff falling away at a certain angle each time you hit the end of that before it's choice o'clock. A very old example for people my age and older might remember that there were a lot of read-along books and cassette tape-based things. And usually there would always be like a story chime when it was time to turn the page after everything.
And R2D2 beeped.
Yeah, it's like when we hit the end and you turn the page, you'll hear and so forth.
I was going to say that you can just ring a little bell anytime it's time for the listener to say something, and that works. It's very effective. It definitely jars you out, but it also kind of pulls you out of the story right away.
Yeah,
so
that's
try not to do that.
Making it smooth, but thematically fitting, right? If it's a game with a lot of bells in a fairy universe, maybe the bell thing works.
I think it depends. That's what's fun about this stuff is every time you go do it, it's a new blank slate. And you get to think about those UI elements, how you want this to be presented. Like when Dave did Jack Ryan, like those are much more open-ended prompts, and there was a very different way of responding to things if they said something out of bounds. That was one thing, whereas Jurassic World is just a little bit more, I don't want to say on the rails, but a little bit more very specific about what you can do at any particular prompt or moment. And you kind of let the story and the narrative design of the story kind of guide you. When I talked about Orpheus device, in a way, it was interesting because we set it up so that there's like an AI. You're literally diegetically sort of talking to the device, and it's tunneling through. It's almost as though the Alexa device is enabling you to talk to ghosts in the seance-like format. So that was in particular a lot of fun.
Yeah, Jack Ryan was an interesting one. We sort of upfront established a vocabulary of like, these are the things that you're going to be able to say anytime you want to. They're going to work. And it was all things like open the box, or close the door, or look at the thing. There was about 10 or 12 verbs that you could have, and then we tried to sort of, as the story went along, highlight all the objects that were targets for these verbs. And so you would always make these simple sentences of unlock the safe, and then then the prompts were just more like, what should we do next? It's very, very open-ended. Interesting.
Yeah, and that kind of came from the tradition. For those that have played it, it started out with kind of text adventures, Infocom stuff like Hitchhiker's Guide. Yeah, that sort of verb, like partial-based verb noun combo, which then moved into inventories, and then kind of moved into what Dave was really heavily involved in with LucasArts, which was it's called the SCUM system, right? Where you had like the 9 verbs in a UI you could touch and then apply to the objects in the room. So like in a way that if you're interested in those kind of that kind of tradition of games, then definitely check out Jack Ryan. November morning, is that right? It's an Alexa skill only, not on Google, but that's essentially what was kind of that, plus an escape room was kind of the concept, right?
Yeah, the interesting thing that we ran up against with that one, I remember, was that it springs out of these sort of escape rooms and adventure games where you have like an inventory of stuff that you're carrying, and there's a sort of a game state, things that you've discovered, and things that have happened. And usually when you're playing one of these things like on a computer or something, you are reminded of all that stuff constantly, just because you're looking at it. You're looking at the room and the state of the room, and we realize we don't have any of that support, and we're just relying on people's memories for all this stuff. So we wound up having to like build in a bunch of things to sort of remind you like what's going on, what were we just doing, and there's some characters in the room with you who will give you status reports constantly to sort of re-up those ideas of what you should be thinking about right now.
I do have a recommendation in case there's any gamers out there and board gamers in the audience. If you want to experience live, like with real people, like human beings around you, what it's like to play a parser game, like a text prompts game without that text prompt in front of you, there's a company called Parsley Games that have a couple series of things called, there's Action Castle. Let me see, there's Action Castle, Background Jungle, Planet Death, and other such things. And what it is only one person who plays the parser has this whole map of where the game can go and turn left or right, pick up the candle, go to the safe, defeat the monster and stuff. But a line of people, because it's done in a party format, you'll have 20 people or so in a room, and they form a line in a big circle, and each person gets to ask the parser one question, and he responds one thing, and that person then moves down the line. So if you were talking to somebody else 10 people back and you weren't keeping track of everything because there's no visual screen to recap everything that just happened, the 10 people in front of you have been trying to go left for eternity. You say right, and everybody goes, ah! Because it's just it's a quick reminder playing a game like that, how if you don't have the sound design to back it up and you don't have the visuals, how quickly you can lose someone if their focus isn't fully there the entire time. It's very tricky.
Oh yeah. Well, to piggyback on something you mentioned a while back, is that the audio quality on these things, on Alexa and Google specifically, is not that great. Simply because of the way that the mechanical systems are set up. And actually, we're trying to break out of that. We have a future where we want to be on websites where you can talk back and forth through these stories there, or through apps and things like that. And our original iOS app had nothing to do with that. It was way before Google and Alexa came along. But because those are the systems that have 50,000 or 50 million devices out in the world, and they're sitting in everybody's houses, it seemed like the best sort of distribution channel to do these things. So that's primarily where you'll get this stuff. But like when I was saying, some of these speakers, like on the Dot, it's not high quality, and we're restricted. You have to kind of compress it down to a very specific MP3 codec that doesn't necessarily sound that great. And it was really weird. You got to think about that and kind of monitor it as you go, and actually just test on the device. Because if you're just listening to audio files, you're listening through a channel where it sounds better. And I remember with Jurassic World, it's built around, well, the volcano is going to explode. And it's like 5 chapters over about 2.5 hours. And the idea was that, you start hearing the rumbles from further away. And then over the course of the 5 chapters, it gets louder and louder and louder. We mapped that out, had the sound design. We got done. And our initial tests were like, wow, you can't even hear it through chapters 1 through 3. There's supposed to be lower rumbling going. And we had to kind of go back and rethink about that and bump it higher across the board, just to sort of make it make sense. So that was a lot of, just those of you that do go out and check this out and see like, oh gosh, wow, like what's up with the quality here? It's like not something we can control at this stage. Although we do know that like Google and Alexa are finally kind of, getting behind doing higher quality. There's some features that are being released that enable that to happen. And again, if you play through the Earplay app on iOS, it'll be a different story.
Yeah. And again, from the sound design thing, it really comes down to who do you think is going to play your game, because you still should mix for the lowest denominator if you think a lot of people might be playing it on the cheapest output or whatever's built in. But I think even the Dot and the normal Echo, like they can output to a Bluetooth speaker set, so they can actually route to your fancy home theater system, and that's great. But if you're maybe making an audio adventure game where most people won't have access to that, and you just want it to sound nice, mixed for what you think, I think your demographic is going to be, if possible. But always sound designer person, I have a drawer in my office of like multiple types of headphones, including really cheap earbuds, and I always try to listen on multiple different outputs before I say thumbs up because you don't know what they got, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and another challenge, if you're a designer, if you can imagine, like, when you make an audiobook or a podcast, or there's just the one linear file, right? And as you heard, it branches, things branch, and so we have a technology that enables you to sort of divide that up when you're designing and writing, and then as the sound designers make those files and input, it's essentially thousands of little mini files, right? Because this happens differently on this branch, that happens differently. So having a background sound that moves across all the files is impossible. So having like a background music moment is tough, especially when the pause is going to happen. There's going to be a moment where the mic listens, where the audio shuts off. You kind of have to think about that in your sound design, because otherwise you could just do a full, have some background atmospheric, have a band playing in the background. But if you're going to have a scene that has multiple choices while a band is playing in the background, you just got to kind of think about that and say, oh, okay, well then now they're in between songs right here at this moment. And so that becomes an important part of the design, and thinking about the, sometimes we want to call like we would call the seams, like the moment between the two files. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time, it seems like, talking about the fade in and the fade out, and how fast they're going to be, and how close to the words do they need to be for every little piece.
Yeah.
Oh, quick note. It looks like the question form, someone had accidentally written over the questions. So if folks are looking at that form and can refresh it, it now actually has the right fields again.
I actually do have a question for you guys.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, with what you were just talking about, John, how do you deal with perspective of sound, as far as like if the character moves and the music is playing in one area?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. That was something we ran into right up front with Codename Cygnus. You've got someone in your ear, you're hearing diegetically what's happening around you. And we have to, if someone's moving around, we have to have a way of expressing that. And obviously the idea is, if you move towards something, you raise the volume. But what we had to add footsteps, which normally footsteps, you're fading in or out. You have footsteps at a constant amount, and it's like those are your footsteps. So if you're running, we hear your footsteps same level on a loop. But if you're running, towards, or let's say you're walking up to a bar, we would put those footsteps flat, but then fade up the blender sound or the shaking of the thing sound. And so that, again, if you're walking away from, or you're walking out of a room, in and out of room gets complicated in these things too. Then it's like, oh, I hear the same footsteps, door creaking, the band is going low as the door shuts, boom. That's now you're in an alley now. But the thing is, it's tough because you can't do just necessarily atmospheric, because if there's a scene, so to speak, let's just say we need to cut that file, we need to think about, all right, well, let's cut the file on the door close. Like the door close would be the very last thing in this file. Then we move to the next file, which is the next place. So it's interesting. The way this all works out is we have these big, huge spreadsheets with all little audio pieces, so that you understand, like, hey, this is like with the actors, like what Brandon was describing earlier. Here's the moment where this is happening. This is happening inside this place. They move to this place, so that all on the right side of the spreadsheet, we could be doing notes for almost each individual file. To that moment, we could be like, oh, hey, I heard a beep in this file. You're not going to hear that beep until the next file, right? That kind of thing. So we use sort of basically Google spreadsheets to do a lot of communication during production between sort of director and sound effects people. And there's always a bit of a learning curve, in terms of participating as a sound effects person. Like I remember, because a lot of really, really good sound effects person, there's a traditional way that when you do an audio file, you do it this way. You put the in and the out. You fade it out, like you're always fading out here. You're fading, and sometimes we would hire somebody to cut some dialogue, for example, and they would send it back like super polished everything. We'd be like, oh crap, we can't use this because you did X, Y, Z. We gotta put it all into the whole. So it's difficult, and in a way, this is what's good and fun about it. It's very difficult to make it into any sort of a factory-like thing. Like we can set up, standards, but you really have to custom think about all these things.
As one of the sound people that's had to work with that, yeah, it can be kind of nuts. And office hours, we had a lot of text that was formatted in one way. We had the actual professor who spoke in a certain environment and often was behind and floating in the room and a little muffled. And I remember having to set up premixes. So as I would output some of that audio for you guys, I had certain channels preset for anything that the AI voice would say, because it had all of those settings already. So every time I needed to output it, at least I didn't have to drop 40 million settings and remember what they all were. You just set that up ahead of time and make that part of your output process. And for folks watching this, because I know here now is a lot of audiobook and linear radio drama stuff, the idea of a spreadsheet tracking system might be alien to you, since I know in that format, often you guys work in a script in teleplay format, right? It's like a stage play. Everything's just down in one page, 1, 2, 3, whatever. This is like Gameverse, where if you aren't familiar with spreadsheets, you learn fast, because things do go in order. But yeah, once that branching starts, the team has to agree on a labeling system that makes sense. So once it's all bracketed and positioned properly, file 1-AB26, whatever, goes where it's got to go. And when you're exporting stuff, you understand how that all plays out, especially if you're mixing the audio and you want it to sound fluid. Like John said, you can't always just add fades the way you might in other projects. You got to be ready for things to be combined in sometimes countless ways, and all sound like it was meant to happen that way. And that's the only way that sentence could possibly have been laid out.
We do have a question that's come in from Seth, and he's asking, has there been examples of interactive audio that's played remotely, like an app that you download to your phone and instructs you to get real locations interact with the surroundings?
Oh yeah,
I can take that on, because there's actually a lot behind this.
Especially Future of Storytelling probably had a ton of
this.
Yeah,
we've seen some interesting stuff. Well, like the one thing that I think I've seen the most common is that museums, and this is the root. Like if you want to think about the first versions of these kind of things coming out, museums have taken that to task and have set up like walking tours inside museums, talking about the art, where you can have your app, you can be listening, and it knows kind of where you are, or you're inputting and doing that stuff. There was a big company, and some of you guys may have already used this technology. It's called Descript, Descript. Fantastic for editing audio dialogue specifically. A lot of podcast companies use this, but originally I can't remember what their original name, but they did sort of interactive audio tours where you would move around and you would hit a certain location in San Francisco and stuff would play, and you would basically go on your own walking tours. And they did that. They did a bunch of those out in Italy. Ultimately, they were acquired. That section, all that content and stuff they were doing was acquired by Bose. Bose, who we partnered with for a while, they had, I don't know if you've seen these, they have these AR glasses that are basically AR audio, not visual. Like there's nothing going on visual with the glasses, it's all audio. And our part in that was just messing around with head gestures. So, like it could tell whether you're nodding or shaking your head. So if you play the Earplay app and you've got those Bose glasses, you could do like a whole little sci-fi story where you're using your head for gestures and playing through a story with that kind of input. But they were attempting to set up this sort of like worldwide AR of audio. The difficulty with that is that if you're really, really specific, you make some content, it only matters for people who live in San Francisco or in San Francisco at the time. Or you make a story here, it only matters if you're there. So you're immediately limiting the audience, limiting the ability for distribution and getting people to play it. Yeah. And so I think that's where it's been a little difficult, for with the Bose AR platform to move forward. But there are companies, and I see them as being, Niantic, who did Pokemon Go and Hogwarts, something or other. Like their technology in their world, it's location based, but it's also, you're able to kind of like it's replicable to everybody everywhere. And I think that in the long run, you're going to see some interesting stuff from them. But to be honest, though, what you're talking about, the most we've seen is walking tours, and it hasn't really played out well as a growing kind of market right now.
Yeah, I know one popular one I tried recently before lockdown happened. There's a group called Clued Up. It's like up with 2 P's, and they run detective days in different cities around the world. And they have an app, and what happens is usually there's a historical landmark or a monument, and then within a mile radius there's different parts of the city that are usually historical and some trying to bring more tourists into the city, and you'll wander around with your little herd, and at least one of you has the app. And once you hit a landmark, your location detecting tells the game that, yes, you've approached the Monument of Washington, and a video will play and give you clues to look for something in the next location. That again still relies on visuals and text, but audio is a big part of it. Usually there was a very loud voice actor, because what happens is, even though one person's got their phone, if you have a team of 6 or so people, they can't all squeeze in, possibly with a light glaring day. So I did appreciate that whoever did the audio mix for Clued Up, that if I was standing 2 people back, I could still hear the clues and where we were going next. But it was all triggered by GPS. So that team mapped out the bits ahead of time, and it would launch once you entered a certain spot. And it was really fun. It was a nice way to see like your city and play a little game. And I think there was a mild registration fee, like a team would have to pay $20 to be able to register, because then at the end, usually it's on a certain day and there's winners who solved it first and all that type of thing. But I liked that experience.
I'm posting another one in the chat. It's immersita.com. They're just starting out, and they are only operating in Lisbon. So if you happen to be in Lisbon, it's a good thing. But it looks like they're going to do some interesting stuff with different kinds of kind of vaguely story-based things, and romances and things like that are aimed at locals and tourists there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of potential. I think that, the voice-based stuff and the interactive audio-based stuff, along with the GP and the location-based stuff, it's all kind of coming together. I mean, and just like we've also seen in VR, it has come a long way in the past 10 years. Some of the technologies we're talking about here are going to move there. It's exciting. It really is. I mean, the idea of making just like virtual scavenger hunt things available is pretty cool.
And it gets people, it's part of that motion to get kids away from their screens and actually play outside. But I think more adults than kids are doing those things, like the detective thing, because a lot of us grew up on, like Scooby-Doo, and the idea of going out and solving a crime and looking for the clues is so much fun. I have an opposite example. I'm not sure if this counts as much, but it is voice detection. If you guys have heard of novel effect, like book novel effect.
They do the kids stuff. Oh yeah.
Because their whole thing is it's encouraging people to read more. And as you narrate your way through a story, so it's less voice acting recording requirements, but on the sound end, you build in sound pads that are triggered as like the mom reads the story to their kids. Once they hit the word bear, like in the text on page 3, the sound designer has already programmed in, bear noises that come in, or a little music jingle that swells once they hit a certain sentence. And I think they've even prepared it so, how sometimes you'll read a book to your kid and maybe you see they're falling asleep, so you skip ahead a couple pages. The design
it knows where you are.
It knows where you are and will follow along. And I see great potential for future of live performance and book readings for that. If you can do your sound design for a show where you're reading A Christmas Carol or something, and it's all listening for you the whole time and can pick up your voice for those cues without someone hitting buttons. It's so neat.
You mentioned Scooby-Doo. There's also some choose your own adventure, like what we were talking about earlier with interactive audio drama. A lot of it comes from that core structural foundation of the choose your own adventure book. A lot of us use those and still do. They're still out there, popular, like the Goosebumps
and Amazon picked them up. Did you see Alexa? I'm muted.
They started
they have their own. Yeah, because Choose Your Adventure is actually a trademark. Look at that.
Yep, there we go.
Yay!
But and that's been translated to kids. A lot of there's still a tradition of that. One of our partners, Capstone Publishing, they're a kids educational publisher. They have a whole set of Choose Your Own Adventure, or You Choose is what they call it. It's a different trademark, You Choose Adventures, which are out there on Alexa. And you mentioned Scooby-Doo. They have you could ask Alexa for Scooby-Doo Adventures, and there's like a set of like 4 books that you can try, and those are also out on, I think, Google Assistant. But just so you know, if you're trying to think of Google Assistant, this is tricky. A lot of people don't figure this out in terms of the third-party apps. You can ask Google for anything, but if you want to get to an app, you have to say, Google, hey Google, talk to Earplay, or talk to Lucky Charms, or Scooby-Doo Adventures, or Batman Adventures, or Superman Adventures, Superman Stories, I think is. So there's a lot of those you can check out.
Yeah. There's even one still out there, like the Wayne investigation. DC made that
Yeah,
for Alexa back in the day, where you try to solve the Bruce Wayne's murder, the Bruce Wayne parents' murder.
That was one of the really early ones. That was around the
Yeah.
time you did the Baker Street, and we were putting Earplay on there. That would have been about 2016, I think.
Yeah, because it was right
Has it
before
been
I
that
moved
long?
to Texas. So I was working with you guys, and I just done Baker Street, and it was right on the cusp of whenever this whole interactive audio on all these devices starting to get popular, and there was a lot of room to grow. And there's still, I think that the deployment and how the public can access it is still a little.
The discovery factor is a little rough, and I think
Yeah.
I alluded to this earlier, but a lot of that is because I think Alexa, they're allowing developers to make apps, and a lot of it is branded content, and a lot of it's advertising, and a lot of it's based on them wanting to like kind of have brands do URLs, basically voice URLs, right? And Google's taking a very different story. It's just not as big and open. I mean, it is, you can get on that, but it's just not as moving forward. It's much more about the home and the smart home. And I think it's not that they're purposefully limiting what goes on, with making these entertainment, but I think that the way that this sort of world is going to evolve is when it moves away from just being inside those big tech giant devices. Meaning, when you can just go to a website, this is something we're fully working on and want to see happen. When you can just go to a website and just play it the same way as you would if you were trying to talk to Alexa or trying to talk to Google. And that's the exciting future I care about and I'm working towards.
I feel like Brandon's been really quiet. Brandon, do you have anything you want to talk about?
Yeah. Well, I'm actually just hearing from Brandon because you've done, we started working on these things like, 5 years ago, and we were very heavily involved. And I remember when we talked about getting the home booth set up and all that kind of stuff. And now you've got like this huge following with your podcast, which is centered around similar. It's centered around interactive storytelling, essentially role playing games. But you're recording the role playing games. I want to hear from you on that, if that's okay.
So that's how I got into audio production, was working with John at Earplay, and now I have a recording studio in the house that we just built. I specifically designed one room to be soundproof and stuff, and that's where we do the podcast from. But yeah, we it's a choose your own adventure, except what gets to choose the adventure are the dice. They say what they want to do, they roll the dice. If the dice are successful, then narratively it goes their way. If not, then we collaboratively come up with how it goes poorly. And we mostly work with independent publishers. A big part of what we do is hitting games. I actually just downloaded that Parsley book that you mentioned with the Action Castle, because I think that would be a fun thing to play. But we've done a little D&D and a little Pathfinder, which are obviously the things that most people know. But for the most part, we deal with Powered by the Apocalypse games and Fate games, and really independent publishers. So they come on and talk about their game and then run us through it. And then our main show, the Crit Show, is Monster of the Week, which is kind of like your Buffy or your Supernatural or Ash versus the Evil Dead.
Yay.
Brian, have you ever done, or Brandon, because I was looking at Brian with the tech. Anyway, Brandon, have you ever done anything with Tecmo?
With what?
Tecmo?
Uh-uh.
Anyway, that's a side conversation. I won't go down that rabbit hole right now.
One company, if I can reference, that kind of does more of the audio game, etc. thing. I've been doing some voiceover work for Frosthaven. If you guys know that name, their whole thing is there's board games like Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, Icethurian Guard, and they create audio stories and response dialogue and exposition that characters from the game can play. And usually you activate it with an app, and it's settings and atmosphere and then those bits. So normally whenever you get to sort of a D&D type game and you hit the end of a chapter, there's like 3 paragraphs that one of your board game friends is supposed to read. And instead they've had all that performed by voice actors. And it just adds that extra level of immersion and fantasy feel. And I like seeing that that's becoming more and more common, that people want to feel more like they're in a video game while they're still getting that nice cardboard and paper experience with the dice and everything. It's fun. also gives many of us more work. So yay. Foreteller. Oh my gosh, we got 3 minutes left, I think.
Yeah. Well, if I could say one thing before we go, I would just say if you're interested in what we've been up to, like what I would, I every time I go back and listen to it, there are a lot of cringeworthy moments, and I'm like, but I still think it's a good example of like old time radio drama, like a love letter to old time radio drama, but put into an interactive format. And that's the first thing we did, Codename Cygnus. If you want to check something out that is really radio drama as opposed to just trying to make something audio interactive, check it out. It's Codename Cygnus. You can get it on iOS under the Earplay. It's in the Earplay app, and you can ask for it on Alexa. Will be out on Google in the near future too. But I don't know if you guys have anything you wanted to plug. Thank you very much.
I plugged Foreteller.
Yeah.
There's titles coming out for that I can't say what they are, but they're awesome.
And Dave had mentioned Jack Ryan. Do we have an Alexa? Yeah. If you ask Alexa for Jack Ryan, we'll get you there.
No, it won't. That'll play the TV show.
Oh well.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Jack Ryan November Morning.
Yeah, I think if you say that, you'll be good.
Maybe that's a good hint that when labeling your apps, please make sure to try to make it something not easily confused, because we chatted earlier that I worked on a game called Baker Street Experience, like Sherlock Holmes on Baker Street. But if you say, Alexa, play Baker Street, it cues up the song Baker Street. But you have to say Baker Street Experience. So that was a whoops. So if you can, try to choose something that won't cue something that is definitely not what you want to send your audience to.
John, I got a question for you before we go, and that's about, can you talk about what you guys did with Circle Round with PBS?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, Circle Round, they have a podcast, one of the popular kids podcasts in America, runs through WBUR in Boston, the NPR ratio. That was the first time where we worked with somebody else to do all the audio. We just kind of designed and wrote, essentially as an exercise, You and the Beanstalk. We took Beanstalk and made it interactive for kids. And they helped us to rewrite a lot of the dialogue to be more kid friendly, but they did everything. They recorded, and it's amazing stuff. Sheer and Shem, I love those folks. They are great collaborators, and and it went out, and it was a part of the very first kid stories allowed on Alexa. And if you get like a kid's Echo Dot for your child, you can access You and the Beanstalk, and it's available on Alexa, and I think we're moving it to some other platforms.
I linked to the podcast channel for Circle Round, but I'm not sure if that's specifically where you want people to go.
Yeah, that's there, and I can, we can, or I guess we can follow up. Well, I don't know. Let me see if I can link it real quick.
I love it. I love though that, like, beyond even just obviously the radio drama stuff, that there's so much potential for getting kids into reading and such with things like this. It's really nice to see this coming around. So it's good. As I speak with a giant velociraptor behind my head. I mean, it's also good to work on the ones where you get to hear people's, flesh being ripped from their bones. But the kids stuff is also really great.
Yeah,
I do like the dinosaurs.
That's actually becoming much more popular than other areas. Like the kid stuff is just really taking off on these speakers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any closing comments? Any thoughts that you guys want to leave us with?
Just thanks for having us. It's really been great to be a part of this.
Well, and it's also great because, like, and John, we talked about this before when I asked you to come on. Is like I hadn't seen you in years, man, and then like just reconnecting and working now with Brandon too at the station here. So it's just cool to get back up with. Yeah.
I like physically seeing people that normally I only get to work with in an audio only universe. So getting to see people's actual heads is just such a joy to me. You know what I mean? But and I haven't physically seen John and maybe also Dave at the last GDC before the world exploded. So
that was 2 years ago. Almost.
Yeah. Oh, so it's nice to see you.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you all. This has been brilliant, and I'm sure there has been a lot of people that have gotten a lot out of this. So thank you for presenting. And Also, please feel free to hang out and check out some of the other things while you're here as part of the festival. And again, thank you for also sponsoring the festival, John.
Yeah, happy to do it. Yeah.
Cool.
We've been wanting to
Cool.
be involved for years. Bonnie's been talking about it. I've just, it's like
Yeah.
this was when it had to happen. This was the year.
I was like, this is such a good fit for Earplay. It's time. It's time. So I'm just happy this came together.
Yeah, thanks
Got
so
you
much.
crazy kids together, you know.
All right. Well, again, check out some of the other events that we have going on later on today. We actually have a pitch panel. So if there's anybody that has some original ideas they want to get out there, you'll actually get to see some professionals and giving feedback, and even some people in acquisitions, et cetera, et cetera. So check that out. And again, thank you to Earplay, and we will see you later in the festival.
Hi, thanks for coming.
Bye, everybody.
Pay your audio people well.
Agreed.
Hire voice actors. That should have been the whole panel. Pay voice actors, hire audio people, and get text on your side. But get funding. I don't know. Come on, government.
We're still going live, and I can't seem to stop that.
We can't stop this machine.
No.
Don't stop the crazy machine. Yeah, I don't know. That's a David question.
I know, and David's not. David.
Is the pitch panel in this channel? Do we need to clear it out?
No, and we still have time. So yeah, there's an hour in between too.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys missed yesterday. Was a lot of back to back to back to back to back.
We're still live, Bonnie.
Oh, today is everything's going fine, everyone. Everything's wonderful.
Cut the mic. Cut the mic. Cut the mic.
Tip your waiters. Hug your cats.
Yeah.
Tell my mother I love her.
So live right now.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Hi, Sean Whalen. Hello. Thanks for coming to see our dog.
See if I can text Mr. David, since.
Thank you guys who did ask questions. We do appreciate that. Sorry about the form going funky in the
We
middle.
live in these boxes now.
This is my home. My home looks just like this. I've never left. I just pulled my favorite project behind me. I thought it'd be fun.
I appreciate that. That's I
was like, a velociraptor feels, and my head fits right between there's the prompt.
Nice. Oh.
I think it's still on, right? Can't you still play that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're pretty proud of it. Yeah.
Man, I will say, as an audio person, being able to access sounds from the films was such a joy.
That was fun. The
Oh my
access we
gosh.
had to the stuff.
I was like, oh, we have all the dinosaurs. Yeah, little geeky nerd me childhood from sitting in the theater watching Jurassic Park was jumping up and down in my head, like,